Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Jonathan Bianco. I'm the Cabinet Member for Property, Highways and Transport, and I am therefore the Chairman of this petition evening. It's debatable whether I'll need to repeat this every time someone new comes in the room, but let me say that there is also the YouTube channel running, so if people are sitting at home watching us, greetings to them too. And so I warn everybody in the audience that if they aren't supposed to be here tonight, they're about to, and they come forward, they're going to be seen on candid camera. So you are warned. We are not expecting a fire drill. So if the alarm does go off, please follow officers to fire exits and we'll see you out of the building safely. I would ask those with mobile phones, and that must be everybody, if they would at least turn them to silent. I would just introduce myself. I have done. On my right is Steve Austin, Traffic, Parking, Road Safety School Manager, and on my left is Ryan Dell, who is a Democratic Services Officer, who will be taking notes. I'm not aware of there being any declarations of interest. And so with that said, the first petition is in respect of Hatch Lane, Harmondsworth, and I'm hoping that I've got Mr. Hardeep Luana here tonight. Good evening, Mr. Luana. I must ask you to come to the microphone because, again, if people are watching on our YouTube channel, they won't hear you if you're not there. So, and that will apply to you also, Councillor Nelson, if and when you want to speak. You'll need to come over there. Mr. Luana, you have up to 5 minutes. You don't have to spend 5 minutes, but you are entitled to it. So feel free to kick off when you're ready.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for hearing this petition. So just to introduce myself, Hardeep Luana, I'm the Chair of Governors for Harmondsworth Primary School, and I've held that position for coming up to 5 years now, and before that I was Vice Chair, and before that I've been a member of the Governing Board for many, many years. So I have a good connection with the school, the parents and stakeholders in the village, and that's really what's prompted me to be here today, to represent the views there and forward the petition that you've had, which has had over 26 signatures, and there were many, many more people who wanted to sign this. The strength of feeling for this petition and for this change is really high amongst the community and stakeholders. So I'd like to start off just explaining where we're talking about and why I'm here. It's the bus stop on Hatch Lane. Now the bus stop is quite unique because when you alight from that bus stop, there is no pavement. So you actually end up almost on an island, a patch of grass, and the only way to go is across the road. And if you look at the road, there is a dropped curb which automatically directs people to go to that direction, which is to cross over. So I'd like to just focus on the safety thing. So I've had feedback from residents, parents in the school, parents with pushchairs about near misses, which have been sent to me. We've got, even this morning, there were 10 to 12 people trying to alight from the bus to get to school, and it's really important as a council, as a governor, that we do provide safe routes, walking routes for our children to come into school and encourage children to walk to school. We've had elderly people from the village, residents, who find it very difficult to cross over to get to the bus stop, especially if they're in a rush, because there's no proper way to cross over. So this is about allowing access to all. And when children do use the bus stop, there's a really easy walk from that bus stop through Candover Close, through an alleyway, through the recreation ground, safely into the grounds of the school. A very safe route, which unfortunately, because of the current situation, I know that parents are not encouraging their children to use, and many of them are driving in, which again really goes against our policy of getting people out of their cars, using public transport, or even sort of where possible coming on foot and if they do come on foot, when they're leaving the school, they can't cross over the road to get onto the bus stop because it's not safe. Also, Year 6, the transition, as we look at children transitioning to high school, this is a really important time for them to get used to buses and, using buses to get to high school. Unfortunately, children don't get that experience because they can't come to school on a bus in many times because there is no safe way for them to get to school. A high percentage of children in Harmondsworth Primary School do not live in the village. They come from areas outside Harmondsworth. So hence there is a real need for us to address this problem. I think any other issues. So just to summarise, for me it's about safety is the number one issue here. Safety of our children, safety of our students. This is backed by the teachers, the head teacher, the governing board, many parents and the children themselves who I've spoken to on visits into the school. And we want to also look at how we can make Harmondsworth more safe. Let's reduce the amount of cars on the road, and this is a good way to do that. We want a safe walking route for our children into the school. And let's not forget people who may work at the airport, who use the buses, who might want to cross over. We want to encourage people to use the bus routes into the airport to get to work and come home. They're also disadvantaged as well. So there's a lot of benefits, I think, if we can really deliver this zebra crossing, and it will make a huge impact to stakeholders, local business and people in that area and on Hatch Lane. June, do you want to add anything to that?
Councillor Nelson, if you want to speak now, do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support everything that Hardip said. I'm also governor of the school, and this issue has been raised quite a few times with some of the parents regarding crossing of Hatch Lane. And as you know, I'm sure Steve knows that on that side where the buses stop, there is no walkway, no special walkway for anybody to cross over. It's just a little drop, a little concrete bit, as you can see from the picture here. And it's important that we do safety. And even though we've got a 20-mile zone on Hatch Lane, cars do come down that road speeding sometimes, especially during rush hours. And it can be very difficult during rush hour time, at the same time the kids going to school, to get people to stop. Some people have to go out into the middle of the road and raise their hands so that they can stop to enable children to cross the road. That shouldn't be. There should be access where a visibility of access for children to cross safely without having to do that. So I totally support the parents and the chair of governors for Harmondsworth School in regards to looking to see how some form of zebra crossing or some form of crossing can be instituted into that specific area. We just want you to consider that and have a look to see what's the best form of safety that can be added to that area to enable the kids to be safe. But not only the kids, residents, and people who walk through the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Austin, do you want to add anything at this point before I...
No, I think it's grateful to petitioners for coming in. There are challenges, the lack of footway, and the fact that the verge is highway to a certain degree, but actually not that wide.
Do we own the rest?
No, it's a private individual, I understand, that owns things beyond the hedge line. But that's not to say that we can't look at other alternatives. I mean, I appreciate the sentiments about the limited area that people can board and alight at that bus stop. And I suspect that if we were looking at it now, or Transport for London were looking at it now, they probably wouldn't put a bus stop there at all. I suspect they say no, it's not viable, and they wouldn't do it. So I don't know how long it's been there, but it's been there for a number of years. But no, I think it's useful to have the testimony from Councillor Nelson and Mr. Luana, and we'll go through the.
You made a good point there about the bus stop. Is there a position either behind us or down the road where pavement does exist on this side of the road, or does this run?
Not for some way up or down there.
Right. Yes, that's what I thought. Okay. I think the issue, as Mr. Austin's pointed out, is not so much whether one can put in. It's a question around actually whether you can put it in. The road is narrow, because one of the questions I asked before was could we perhaps put in a refuge in the middle of the road? You know, a couple of keep left side. That would at least be a step forward. But I think the view we've taken is that the road's too narrow to allow for that and for vehicles to pass. And the question with the zebra crossing, I think, comes down to whether there's sufficient space on the alighting side of the next to the bus stop, in other words, to put what is necessary in to make it work. I sympathise fully with the sentiments you've expressed, but I think the best thing we can do at this point is, the other thing I was going to add is it's disappointing that, as this is a 20-mile-an-hour zone, that clearly people aren't paying any notice of it, or very little notice of it, and that comes in line with the fact that we can't, as a council, do anything to enforce it. That in itself is disappointing. I think the only sensible thing we can do is follow the suggestions in the recommendations tonight, which is firstly to undertake a speed survey and better understand the types of vehicles that are coming down, which we can do quite easily. As I'm sure you know, Councillor Nelson, we've done them many times before. And ask officers to make the necessary checks to see what is feasible in terms of a crossing, or what we'd need to achieve to even consider a crossing. Because I think if it's counted out on the basis that there would be more safety issues than we solve, then clearly we would have to think further. So I'd like to do that. There's a suggestion here we do a video survey. I'm not really very familiar with that. Mr. Austin, do you want to?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The video survey will identify sort of the desire lines. I mean, clearly here you're very limited because you only can get off the bus and you can only alight onto this small area. It's what happens after that. Do people only cross at that point, or is there a point further up the road that people go up to? And so it can be useful, but I think with the testimony from the lead petitioner and Councillor Nelson, I think in this instance it might. I think we because it's so limited where you can get off the bus, then the desire line is at that point, isn't it? So
can I ask another further point? Excuse me. I asked about the pavement further up, and clearly that's not an option. Is there a point where Highways land is wider at any point along that stretch?
We need to investigate it further. Looking at the Highways layer on the GIS, it doesn't appear to be anywhere near to where the existing bus stop is. It could be a little bit further down, a few yards. I don't know, but it's something we can investigate.
I was only thinking that maybe if that is the case, that it might be worth putting the crossing there and getting TfL to move the bus stop there, if that worked better. If the road was wider or something at a point. Okay. Mr. Luana, do you want to add, or he wants to add? Please, yes, I was just going to ask him.
Thank you, and a very sort of interesting debate there. At the moment, where our children are alighting, our residents, there is a dropped curb there, yeah? So almost we're telling people with pushchairs, prams, wheelchairs, that's the point, yeah? So I think, so we're in a way already telling people, cross here, yeah? So what we're trying to do is make that route safe. That's all we're trying to do, make it safe.
Mr. Luana, I understand that, and I understand the point. I think what I was trying to suggest was one of the things that Mr. Austin mentioned was how narrow our bit of land, our highways land, is there, which may well impact our ability to install a zebra crossing. And my question to him was, if we move the zebra crossing 20 or 30 yards in either direction, do we have a bit more space that we might be able to put a new hard standing area and a new drop curb so that people would then cross there? Because clearly, if there was nothing to cross for where the current crossing is, i.e. if it's not the crossing, the current bus stop is, in other words, if that was 20 yards up the road, no one would be crossing there because there's nothing when they get there. They cross there because the bus stop is there and they've either got off the bus or they want to get on the bus. And I'm only suggesting it as a avenue to examine. If we found that 20 yards one way or the other down the road, we had more land on this side of the road which would enable us to better facilitate putting in something, then that would be a good thing. And if people have to walk 10 yards further or 10 yards less, it would, be a small price to pay to get a solution. If you're happy with that, I'm going to move the 5 recommendations as shown on the order sheet, and let the officers do their digging, and we'll come back to you and let you know what progress we've made or haven't. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 5, which is Hill Lane and Orchard Close. Do we have Miss Rachel Taylor? Miss Taylor, if you would mind bringing yourself forward. If more than one of you wants to speak, you may, but you still only have 5 minutes between you. And so please press the red button when you're ready to start.
Hi. Okay, so we're here to try and get some kind of double yellow lines at the top of Orchard Close. I've got some photos of here. We have been having quite a lot of issues with double parking, which has become worse because of HS2. We're having, luckily, obviously now that people are working from home, we've had double parking, we've had a fire engine not be able to get through, lorry drivers not be able to get through, ambulances where we've had to sort of like rush out and move our cars because people leave their cars. They leave them kind of double parked for the whole day, sometimes for 2 or 3 days without coming back. It's quite a narrow area. When they double park, it's really hard for myself and Rachel to get on and off of the drive safely. And see what's happening. Did you want the photos?
Well, I know the spot, so that's useful. But I always bring them up. Yeah,
So this is the this is just kind of how the residents park on a normal day. So this is the area that we were hoping to get the yellow line just here.
At the junction.
Yeah.
Just up.
Yeah. Just, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, you'll need to go back.
Oh, sorry. I think you. Yeah,
I think there was a proposal beforehand which actually seems to sort of actually give us what we need, which is the double yellow lines on the side of 19 Hill Lane, because what is a double carriageway at the moment goes down to single carriageway because of the parking, and it's when people park on that opposite side that the obstruction is and you just can't navigate around. In the case of both the lorry and the fire brigade, although we tried, the residents were not the people who were sort of doing the parking, so we couldn't actually move for them.
Is that it? Please press your button. Thank you. Gentlemen, any of you, or all three of you, want to speak on this subject?
Possibly just two, very briefly.
Yes, whoever wants to speak first. Ladies, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to move aside. Because of the wonders of YouTube, these gentlemen need to be heard on a microphone, and therefore we may call you back, but what can I do?
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll be very brief. There's not a lot of time, but I will just say that as has been said, this is an issue that goes back to around about 2015, where we've got email exchanges with Kevin Urquhart on this very issue. For whatever reason, it slipped off the radar a bit, I think. However, the issue hasn't gone away, and although the HS2 issue that's referred to in the report is to an extent on the ebb, hopefully it will be on the basis of additional car parking provision. I can tell you that as a motorist myself, it's extremely congested at that location at that point. So the other thing I'll just quickly say to you is I appreciate you taking the petition. They didn't have the requisite number of signatures, but that wasn't for want of support. It was more of a systems issue with registering them online. So I'm grateful for that. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cawthorne. Really simple for me. I don't think this is an overly complicated. I think we should consult on the double yellow lines, find out what residents think. My gut feel is that they're going to be in favour of it. It is a bit of a block end. I walk up there most days, walking around my ward or heading off to see friends or frequent the local establishments, and I can see that there's just too many cars there, and if there was an emergency, they'd either have to go round an awfully long way round, which is obviously not ideal. So I'd hope that you'll take the recommendations that we just consult for double yellow lines, and should residents support that, which I'm sure the petitioners will encourage, we can then get them installed. Thank you, Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, would you mind swapping back with the petitioners? I might have a question for them. Apologies. What threw me slightly to start with, of course, is that Orchard Close isn't actually a close. I'm not going to suggest we get it renamed at this point, but that did throw me to start with. When you mentioned double parking, what you meant was cars on either side of the road, just to be clear. Okay, and therefore the bit in the middle isn't wide enough. Okay. Are you... we've shown a plan of what one might do. I suspect the occupant of number 19 Hill Lane may have something to say about it. I don't know whether he or she's in favour or not. Yes, in a minute. Because obviously that is going to probably impact him or her the most in terms of parking outside their own house, although hopefully they've got off-street parking. And you mentioned that you had difficulty getting out of your drive. Can I ask which house you live in to make that clear? So those were my comments, really. Okay,
so when we consulted back in 2014-15, what was decided actually was a double yellow line was put around the two corners. So actually number 19, he does have off-street parking, but he's already got these double yellow lines around both. Rachel's number 21, and I am next door. So I'm actually to Field Close. So my front door is Field Close, but my back door and my off-street parking and my drop curb are Orchard Close. So yes, so as I say, the double yellow lines are both around both corners already. So it would only be kind of the straight up until the start of 2.
Okay, thank you. Well, look, I think this is a fairly sort of non-contentious, and also it doesn't cost the council very much to implement. A couple of tins of yellow paint, and we're away. But so on that basis, I think it makes sense to request officers to I don't know. Do we petition or do we just do? Not petition. Do we survey or do we just do?
We will do a formal consultation.
In that case, that we will do a formal consultation, and subject to what the outcome of that is, and assuming it is along the lines that you will hopefully prompt, then I can't see any difficulty in adding that. The other question I was meant to ask is assuming we do that bit, do you think there's often a danger when one does a little bit, all it does is move the problem. Do you think that's...
No, I think the people do the double parking where we're proposing the double yellow lines because it's a fence. There's no houses there. Whereas as you go further round, there's houses that have all got drop curbs, and so it doesn't kind of lend itself to that.
The road widens as you get towards the end of that sort of fence because there's a turning circle. It's more obvious that the houses are facing on, as Claire says, because most her and her neighbour, their actual front doors are on the other side. People just think it's a fence as opposed to noticing the drop curbs and the signs that say access needed.
Okay, thank you. Well, I move those two recommendations, and we will let you know what happens. Thank you. And now, alas, I must wait 3 minutes until it's 7:30, because those who might tune in remotely or indeed might come rushing in the door at 29.5 minutes past wouldn't wish to miss what's coming next. Apologies. Okay, gentlemen and ladies, is Mr. John Bridgman to be seen? Thank you, sir. Would you mind coming up here? For those who didn't hear, well, Mr. Bridgman, unless there's two of you going to speak? Oh, fine. Well, I dare say all of these people are neighbours, or to some degree. Mr. Bridgman, this is how it works. You get 5 minutes to speak. after which I may or may not ask questions, or in fact, as I know your councillors are present, I will ask them if they wish to speak. I believe all three of them want to. And I will then maybe ask questions of you or them, and I may open the floor to a limited degree to other people present in case they wish to add, assuming that those people present are indeed here for this petition and not the following one. Unfortunately, due to the wonders of modern technology, which means we're on YouTube, for those who can't attend, anyone who wishes to speak will have to come to this desk here so that you can be heard by the microphone, and because you're then heard by the microphone, then people listening or watching this on YouTube can also hear you. So there may be a bit of toing and froing, for which I apologise. However, Mr. Bridgman, when you're ready, you have up to 5 minutes. Please press the big button on the top of your microphone stand, and that will turn it on, and you can then go. I beg your pardon? The councillors then speak after. Yes.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to present our petitions to the council for PMS and 20 mile an hour zone in our section of the Ridgeway. I'd also like to thank my local councillors for their advice and support in getting to this stage. I note that the council's report considers the 20 mile an hour zone first before the PMS, but residents signing the petition consider the PMS to be the main objective, with the 20 mile an hour zone as a secondary but equally necessary objective. We believe we need both a PMS and a 20 mile an hour zone to address all the road safety issues that residents and pedestrians currently face from unrestricted and inconsiderate parking on our section of the Ridgeway. Of particular concern is the safety of school children going to Warrender and Bishop Ramsey School, which are close by. Warrender School is in the process of doubling in size, so adding to the numbers of vehicles as well as to the numbers walking to school. We are also on the direct route from the tube and bus stops in Rystead Manor to Bishop Ramsey, and large groups walk together who cannot be relied upon to pay much attention to the road, particularly on the way home. All residents appreciate that the road safety issues on our section of the Ridgeway are caused by unrestricted and inconsiderate parking on a narrow road on a hill with several bends. The lack of sight lines, because cars parked on the bends, often result in vehicles approaching from opposite directions, not seeing each other until they are almost bumper to bumper. They're blind bends. This also gives rise to driver annoyance, impatience and anger, and last July there was a horrifying incident of road rage, which Councillor Philip Cawthorne is going to be describing in his address to you. But we caught that on video, which I think is going to be shown to you at a later stage. The 20 mile an hour scheme would, whilst offering some road safety improvements on their own, would not tackle the main road safety issues that residents face from commuters, shoppers and those working nearby who park in every available space and even cross the sloping path of 2 drop curbs between adjacent driveways. This often makes it excessively difficult for residents to exit their drives safely when vehicles are also parked opposite their drives on the other side of the road, and to see whether drivers are approaching as they exit from their drives. I note that the Council are considering commissioning an independent traffic survey to monitor traffic movement and speed on the Ridgeway, but I'd just like to point out it would not record the number or distribution of parked cars on the road, which affect traffic speeds, and that such surveys cannot give a good indication of whether the speed of the vehicle is a safe speed for the road at that time. When sight lines are restricted by vehicles parked on both sides of the road, which is the case for much of the day, the safe speed is a maximum of 10 miles per hour, more like 20 to 10 miles an hour, but most vehicles comfortably exceed that. It may not be the Council's usual practice to implement parking schemes in a small section of the road because parking may be displaced to surrounding roads. But I must stress the point that our part of the Ridgeway is a special case because uncontrolled and unrestricted parking dangerously restricts sight lines for drivers, which is simply not an issue on adjoining roads. It is because of dangerously restricted sight lines that the Council bans parking on junctions altogether, despite the fact that this space is parking to hopefully safer parking area spaces nearby. I think we have clearly shown the urgent need on safety grounds for the Council to make an exception to their normal policy in this case. We have no objection to the Council consulting more widely on a larger PMS and 20-mile-an-hour zone, and we support the aims of the petition the Council will be considering after hours to improve the safety of children going to Warrender. But what we do not want that to delay, let alone prevent, a PMS and 20-mile-an-hour zone in our section of the Ridgeway if residents and other roads are not supportive, as they don't face the same road safety and parking issues we face in our section of the Ridgeway. There is also the precedent of the Council introducing a small PMS in nearby Windmill Way, presumably because it was close to Ruislip High Street and the residents do not have off-street car parking. We too are a special case for a small PMS, this time on road safety grounds that the Council cannot ignore. We are therefore looking for assurances tonight from the Council that we will get a PMS and a 20-mile-an-hour zone in our section of the Ridgeway, whatever the views of residents and other roads. Before I finish, I should just emphasise that this is the first time a petition for a resident-only PMS has been proposed. Previous parking petitions were for a single yellow line prohibiting all parking for an hour in the morning and an hour and in the afternoon, covering a wider area, and they were rejected because residents and visitors would also be unable to park on street at those times, and the area extended to roads where there were no parking or safety problems, like those we face on our section of the Ridgeway. Finally, we see the need to consult all residents in our section of the Ridgeway on the PMS and 20-mile-an-hour zone petition package, but I must stress that the do-nothing option is not a safe option for any road users, be they school children going to school, residents trying to exit their driveways and drive safely down our road, or to other car drivers or cyclists using our road. Thank you for your time.
Which councillor wants to bat first?
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. Sorry, may I be?
I was just wondering if you wanted to wait for the crowds around you to settle.
Wait, my colleagues join me. So, yes, I suppose it's worth saying to begin with, this is a part or corner of Ruislip that really have had new ward councillors from May of last year. So, to an extent, there's been a degree of catch-up in terms of the history to this. What we do know that there's a very interesting mix of circumstances, I guess, in this particular road. On the face of it, are contradictory. There's no doubt that the road experiences a range of problems. One of them is vehicle speed, we know that, and that resonates very much with the next petition item. But also parked vehicles can also create problems with sight lines and occasional, I think more than occasional congestion, when vehicles are trying to pass each other in opposite directions. And the video that was alluded to briefly was I'm afraid, a very heated and ugly scene, indeed a frightening scene between motorists last year, which ended up, believe it or not, in baseball bats being wielded and threats of aggression, all kinds of nasty things, with the police being called. So I won't dwell on it more than that, but it was a nasty scene. It illustrates the sort of problems that happen in that road. I've been honest with Mr. Bridgham. As a general rule, I'm not a big fan of parking management schemes, I have to say that, and I've said that to him. But I do think that the safety issues posed by parked vehicles, given the bend in the road, do warrant some discussion around what is possible at the very least at this location. So I do have some sympathy with the request for the reduced speed limit, and at the very least some dialogue over what we can achieve in terms of the other issues we've got. I'll leave it there since my colleagues will want to chip in, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to support the lead petitioner's very eloquent address to you. There are particular problems on this road, clearly. And whilst I echo what Councillor Cawthorne has just said, something does have to be done. That nasty incident was, albeit one, but nevertheless, I suspect, and I know that there have been a lot of other near misses, and that's a very significant problem. So finding a solution to not just the speed, but the parking problem is imperative.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to talk a little bit around the school children that are walking up and down the Ridgeway. We have a large number of Warrender and Bishop Ramsey children using that road to access either Warrender or Bishop Ramsey. Whilst it might not be directly outside the school, it is probably a unique case in the borough where actually it is almost in the middle of a primary and secondary school, almost like the heart of between the two, for walking, for accessing both schools. So I just think that needs to be taken into account when we're considering the 20-mile-an-hour zone. And any parking management scheme, of course, would have to be up for consultation, and I think we would like to see the results of that consultation before taking an absolutely firm position, but I just wanted to reiterate that point around the schools.
Thank you, gentlemen. It probably makes sense if you retired and Mr. Bridgman returned, so that if I have a question or two for him, he's in a position to answer. Sorry about the musical chairs. Well, Mr. Bridgman, I'd always thought Ruislip was a nice place to live, but clearly this has been... people wielding baseball bats has changed my mind forever. Parking management schemes are something that the council never installs unless they are requested by residents. And our experience, as a general rule, as you indeed pointed out, is that they don't work unless they cover a reasonably wide area. And there have been attempts in the past in a number of the surrounding streets, not in the Ridgeway, but in a number of the surrounding streets, to look at parking management schemes, and the residents of those streets subsequently decided they didn't want them. Now, whether their minds have changed with the passage of time, I couldn't begin to say. Parking management schemes, however, generally result in a number of particular actions. The first, of course, is a reduction in the number of parking spaces in that street. Because parking management schemes, the engineers that install them have to adhere to a wide range of rules as to where an acceptable bay can be put and where it cannot. And the result is there will be sections where there are yellow lines and there will be sections where there are bays, but the overall amount of parking will be reduced. I suppose the second thing I would say is that generally speaking, parking management schemes operate on a limited hours basis. So they might be operating from, and they are often installed to deter commuters. So they might, a parking management scheme, one I parked in today, for example, prohibited parking between the hours of 1 and 2, Monday to Friday. Now that therefore would mean that outside of those times, anyone could park normally. So it might not overcome that issue. My biggest concern, however, is that by installing a parking management scheme in the Ridgeway, it would simply move the problem. And we've had a lot of this. Parking management schemes tend to creep. And when one does a survey and people come forward and say, yes, we must have a parking management scheme in this street, this street, and this street, and we do the survey, we always include the streets around those streets, and invariably those people say, no, we don't want one, we haven't got a parking problem, we're quite happy with how things are. And what tends to happen then is we may install this scheme in 3 or 4 roads that people request, and as sure as eggs is eggs, 6 months, a year later, we have complaints from the people in the surrounding streets who have now been put upon by that traffic moving to those streets, who then also want one. So you find eventually the scheme has crept, and the whole borough's covered in them. So it's something to think about. I think the other thing you need to be aware of, if you're not already, is that for the first time we have instigated from the 1st of April a charge for the first permit. Up until the 1st of April, the first permit was issued free. We are now charging £75. So people would need to think about that as to whether they want to spend £75 to park outside their own house. I could tell you that it's equivalent of 20p a day, which seems pretty cheap to park outside your own house, but it's obviously 20p more than you used to pay. So those are factors. I will ask officers to look into it, but I wouldn't rate your chances particularly highly. We will look at the principle of it.
Can I make any comments?
I will in due course. I see that your or one of your rationale for asking for it, obviously, is to clear the street of unnecessary parked cars and which would obviously make life easier for those who are trying to get in and out of their drives. But of course, the less cars parked in the street does act as an encouragement for people to speed. And of course, this is coupled with a request for a 20-mile-an-hour zone, which I have to say that as a general rule I'm not in favour of, except when they're outside schools. My concern in that respect is, of course, that we can't enforce 20-mile-an-hour zones. The council has no powers to enforce a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So we can put the signs up, and if people choose to obey them, good-o. But the only people in London who have the ability to enforce speed limits are the Metropolitan Police. And I'm guessing that at the moment they're rather busy on other things. So it's an issue we've come across before. The council does not have powers to enforce. We can't put cameras up. We can't send someone along with a gun. We can't do any of those things. Only the police can. So it does sometimes act as a deterrent, but I warn you of the lack of teeth that go with it. A slightly cynical part of me might suggest that many of those speeding may be parents rushing to drop their kids off or pick them up because they're running late or rushing off to school or whatever. But obviously that would be around school drop-off and pick-up times as opposed to other times of the day. So I don't see that as possible. I do see that as a possible issue. There are, of course, other steps the council could take to try to reduce speeding. And one such step we have used elsewhere and has found to be reasonably effective are the flashing warning signs. You're going too fast, and either it shows you're going at 32 miles an hour or whatever it might say, or there's a nice green thing that says you're going at the right speed. So we have found that those are quite useful, and we've operated them in a number of places, and indeed we are about to install some not very far from you in Howlett's Lane, so you'll be able to see what they look like if you don't already know. So those are things we can do. I heard what you said about independent traffic survey. One of the central comments you have made is around speed, and that is our go-to first step. So I'm more than happy to ask officers to undertake a survey because it is a good way of establishing what the speeds being driven at up and down that street are, and it can also determine whether these are cars or vans or trucks. So it does have the ability to differentiate, and it will be a useful piece of advice when making the subsequent decision. So I think that's where I am on that. I'm happy for officers to move it forward, to look at it further, but I wanted to highlight what I consider to be the issues around the requests you've made. Mr. Bridgman, if you want to come back, I saw you nodding or shaking your head or something in between. So please, if you'd like to make a further brief comment, I'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, no, I don't think do nothing is not an option. The thing about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit at the moment is that even if people go 20 miles an hour with cars parked on a blind bend, that is far too fast. So the traffic management survey is likely to show that the traffic is not moving very fast, but that speed is likely to be still too fast for the safety of the road. I have to go down the road at about 10 miles an hour to be sure that I'm not going to be going head-to-head with a car coming up the other way, which I simply cannot see because vehicles are parked right on the bends on both sides. It is, it's every time we do this, we get hitting against a brick wall. This has been the situation for years. It's been getting worse and worse, and every time the argument is the same. It's a small area, but it's going to be expanded to other areas. I've given reasons why we're a special case. It's for road safety reasons, and people should not be parking there all day on the bends. It's just not acceptable anymore. And the way that they park across the sloping parts of driveways, so you can't get a swing out, it's just unreasonable. It's that we've come to the end of our tether really on the behaviour of non-residents parking in our road in a dangerous manner, which is detrimental to us, to school children using the road, who, it's just unacceptable. If you saw the road at almost any time of day, you would see it's pretty bad. But I do accept that, of course, there would be vehicles parked during the day if you have a 1 hour restriction. But that's not such a bad thing in a way, so long as it's not the same density, because you would still be able to have better sight lines, and it would actually act as a little bit of a traffic calming. But at the moment, the traffic calming from the parked vehicles is such that you don't have any. It compromises safety as well. So you need if you like, a change in policy to get round that.
Mr. Bridgman, I hear what you say. I mean, frankly, if the issue transpires to be parking on the bins is an issue, then simply we could put a yellow line down there rather than worry about a parking management scheme. That might have the danger, of course, is that as you clear the road, so traffic will run faster. That's just a fact. I think you'll find when you're presented. We found this in other places where people are very pleased when we resurface the road, because of course it goes from being rough and horrible to pinball soft, smooth, and a billiard table smooth is what I meant to say. And of course suddenly people go, oh great, and they go faster. There are unintended consequences of some of the things we do, and I suspect that by reducing the number of cars parked there, we may make it clearer in some areas, but the danger is that we end up creating a new problem. Mr. Bridgman, I hear what you say. I think the first step is to send officers away to do the survey, to look at conditions, look at the practicality or otherwise of a parking management scheme, and or what else we might do in its place if that isn't suitable, and we'll report back in due course.
As long as you haven't got a closed mind to one.
I try not to have a closed mind, but I would add that the final nail in the potential parking management scheme coffin is that, of course, the money for parking management schemes comes from TfL, Transport for London, i.e. the Mayor for London. He's not the best at parting with money in our direction, shall we say. So it doesn't always happen as quickly as we might like. Have you got that? Okay, Ryan?
Thank you.
Okay. So that takes us to item 7. Is Miss Helen Brown here? Can I ask that just the petitioner comes forward?
So I'm Mike Smith, head teacher at Warrender. Helen's the deputy, which was unavailable to come today. However, it will be the children speaking rather than myself.
They have 5 minutes.
Fabulous. Okay, well thank you very much. Children.
Article 6 of the UN Convention on Children's Rights states that every child has the right to survival, protection and education. This document states that all children have the right to survive and the state must do all it can to make sure children are safe. Article 6. Children's survival and development. Every child has the right to survive. The state must do all it can to make sure children survive and develop to the full extent possible.
One Monday morning, the school council went to observe the Ridgeway. We saw over 200 cars in 20 minutes, travelling in both directions down the road. The drivers seemed in a rush to get to their destination, driving very unsafely down the road. The parents were holding on to their children, trying to get across the very busy road.
On that day, we surveyed 102 people, and 90% of them felt unsafe or very unsafe, and only 3 of them felt safe. Why is it fair that on the right side of Warrender people get to cross a zebra crossing safely, but on the left we have to risk our lives to cross the road every morning.
Thank you to the children for that lovely presentation. As you can see, they did lots of work on measuring the traffic, surveying parents, and this has all come about because those of us that travel in that direction to school are struggling to cross the Ridgeway every day with our children. This is because of the volume of traffic on the Ridgeway, the parking on the Ridgeway, and the business of the area due to the two schools in close proximity. It's very difficult to see. Cars are travelling quickly, and the school supports us to walk to school as much as possible, which parents are very willing to do, and also for older children to walk by themselves. But at the moment, this really isn't possible for those of us that have to travel in that direction and cross the road. We could not let our children that are aged 10 and 11 cross the road by themselves because it's just not safe enough.
As the previous petitioner said, it is a fairly unique situation. The fact it is the main thoroughfare between both Bishop Ramsey and Warrender. So there is a large quantity of pedestrian traffic needing to go in both directions. So a system which would enable the children to cross safely on a road that's already been identified to be both difficult for sight lines and also potential speed would be very, very welcome.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you to the three children whose names I don't know, but well done being brave and standing here and talking. And obviously encouraged that you're setting them tasks to bring this knowledge forward. Thank you for your petition. What you're not asking for is a zebra crossing, as far as I can see. Well, certainly that doesn't become apparent in...
That would be our first preference for a crossing patrol person. If that
we're phasing those out, I'm afraid, unless you've got one already.
No, we don't.
Oh. You have a zebra crossing the other side of the school. So the issue here is that children can't use that because parents want to stop either side, is that?
The zebra crossing is from Windmill Hill.
Yes.
The zebra crossing isn't between Bishop Ramsey School and Warrender. So any child who's walking or scootering or cycling to school from the Bishop Ramsey side has no safe way of getting across the Ridgeway.
Yes, I understand that. The issue is one of sightlines. Mr. Austin, do you want to add anything here or not at this stage?
Thank you, Chairman. I think once again the recommendations in the report will, if you move those forward, it will give us adequate ammunition, if you like, to consider all the points so well put by the pupils and the head and deputy head. And I think that will all be part of a wider consideration of the previous petition and what petitioners have put forward now. So I think let's take a holistic approach to the Ridgeway and include all of those items, and hopefully develop something that will help support road safety in the area.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you've heard what I've said about 20-mile-an-hour zones. As a principle, I don't have a problem with them outside schools. So that section there is something that I'm sure the council can consider. The real question is, will people take any notice of it? And you can put as many signs up as you like, but if people ignore it, they ignore it. So the wider question remains, how do you cross the road safely? And that is something, as Mr. Austin has just said, is something we can look at. Whether the answer is a zebra crossing, whether that's feasible, acceptable, and whether we have the money for it is something we can look at. How quickly or otherwise we could do something, I suspect not that quickly. We have a lot of schemes under consideration at the moment, but certainly yours would join the list. we can look at whether there are other alternatives, like the flashing signs, like other things we might come up with. I should add that we're not in favour of road humps either anymore, so as a general rule we wouldn't be keen to install road humps. Unfortunately they seem to cause as many problems as they solve these days. Does that make... Do you want to add something? Please do.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to offer again the option to the school to work with our road safety and school travel team, because there's a whole host of things that you can tap into. Pedestrian training, bikeability. I know you do some of those.
We access bikeability. I have that every year. We do pedestrian training for all of our children. We did engage with the different schemes as well as part of the expansion of the school a couple of years ago, because we had to go through the whole process. So we have done that. We've also advertised the poster that got sent to all schools suggesting zones which were within 5 and 10 minutes walking of the school. In addition to that, we also, when we take children for the national cricket and swimming at Highgrove Pool, we walk them there. So we do engage quite heavily with the pedestrian usage.
That's fantastic, and I would encourage you, don't limit yourself just to those things. There's lots of other things, and if you're working with us on your school travel plan, then there could be other funding opportunities open to us which are more difficult to tap into if you don't. So please, be encouraged. I mean, Councillor Bianco's made a commitment that we'll look at this, but there's lots of other things we can do in addition to it rather than just engineering measures.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Well, that sounds positive. I think the sensible thing, therefore, is that that we will look at these issues. That is essentially what the 4 recommendations say, and we'll come back to you in due course. Oh, hello. You want to say more? I'm not sure you're entitled to say more, but being very friendly, I will invite you. Gentlemen, apologies, you'll have to get up so they can have the microphone.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'd like to, if this is possible, ask you to consider a 5th recommendation, which you can be, that you as the Cabinet Member note the excellent work that the School Council has done in bringing this to our attention. I've noticed on other ones sometimes we do have, if we're impressed by a thing, I think that would be quite nice for, and I'm going to make sure I've got all their names right, for Cassius, Rosie and Anise, for the brilliant way that they did it, but also that the School Council are the ones that I know came up with this they were with the Mayor the other day when they came and asked her lots of brilliant questions, so well done to them. But I do think really looking at that crossing point in this scenario is an important step to take. I don't think we should just keep it broad. I really think as an early thing we should have that as the first thing that we're looking at, the first consideration, so that the young people can feel safe. It was worrying to hear that only 3 of them felt safe. And all of the others didn't. So well done, guys. You did a brilliant job, and I'll hand over to Councillor John and Councillor Philip.
Very little to add beyond that, other than to say, I went to the school and had a first-class presentation, a little bit longer than the one you had, but it was very well put together, so I commend that and the pupils involved. And, in terms of taking this forward, I guess as soon as we can have some time frame for when we might see some progress on this, that would be handy. If that needs to be tempered with realism, then so be it. But it would be useful to know how soon we can expect things to come forward, to some extent at least. I will simply say that. I'll hand over to my colleague.
Well, I can certainly see a bright future in a certain profession I'm very well acquainted with, as far as those 3 young children are concerned. If they want to go on in life and become barristers, I think they're very well equipped to do so. But as far as the petition is concerned, I think it's the crossing point that's the main issue. and the one that I would invite you, Chairman, to really concentrate on, because it's quite clear that although there may be other crossing points in other areas, that the one that the petitioners are talking about really is the one to concentrate on, and the one that is of the greatest concern. To have young people as concerned as they are about their safety walking to school, which of course we encourage, is something quite stark. And in order to continue encouraging them to walk or cycle or whatever, we must provide a safe route for them to do so, and for them to be confident in such a safe route. So as soon as is possible, coming up with ideas for that crossing and the safety of that route, please. Thank you very much.
Noted, gentlemen. On that basis, I will move the five. We've added that one. 5 recommendations as shown on the order paper. Thank you. That concludes the business of this evening.